Een ding moet die wêreld daar buitekant weet. Ons kan nie sonder vryheid lewe en as dit dan moet, dan sal ons hom vat met die geweld van het werk.
Eugene Terreblanche, leader of South Africa's Afrikaner resistance movement, the AWB. Before the 1994 election that brought Nelson Mandela to power, the AWB wallowed in the symbolism of aggression and white supremacy. Yet Terreblanche's recklessness would help destroy the very system he wanted to uphold. Terreblanche drew his strength from fears among white Afrikaners that their government was selling out to the African National Congress. In late 1992, the ruling National Party and the ANC were trying to break a deadlock that had stalled negotiations for 2 years. The National Party was insisting on compulsory power sharing that would give the white minority blocking powers at every level of government. The ANC demanded straightforward majority rule. While the white extremists boycotted the negotiations, the two major players got together.
We started having what we call boss berats, that is, talks away in the bush, between the ANC and the government, to try and thresh out outstanding issues.
It was probably for many of our ANC counterparts the first time that they flew in government aeroplanes. It was also significant because it was the first time that we flew together in any aeroplane whatsoever.
They went to a remote game lodge. One of the ANC negotiators was Joe Slovo, chairman of the Communist Party. The party had been allied with the ANC for decades. Slovo was on the ANC's executive. He had supported the Soviet invasions of Czechoslovakia and Afghanistan. As chief of staff of the ANC's armed wing, he had sent guerrillas into action and made fiery funeral speeches.
Crush, once and for all, those who are responsible for so much mourning.
Slovo's reputation still sent shivers down the spines of government members at the conference.
I went to the swimming pool and found a stranger in the swimming pool, and I wanted to walk away from it when I discovered that this was Joe Slovo. Slovo noticed me, and I had no option but to join him. Now that I felt extremely uncomfortable about, because Joe Slovo, the communist, the terrorist, what would my late father have said about this? A staunch policeman, terrorist hunter, his son in the swimming pool with this communist terrorist.
But Slovo, now ill with cancer, had surprised everyone by revealing himself to be a pragmatist. Writing in a party journal, he had proposed a compromise to break the deadlock, a sunset clause in the new constitution which would provide for compulsory power sharing for a fixed number of years, before fading out like the setting sun. At the Bush conference, the National Party showed interest.
We realized that in the final instance, the major breakthrough that we have to make in this country was to find a settlement with the ANC. That's the reality.
We used to go in for a degree of jollification in the evenings, spend a bit of time in the pub together at night, and obviously when you are negotiating with people and you create that kind of social rapport, things become easier, and you get to know them, you get to understand each individual a little better.
During the conference, tentative agreement was reached on arrangements for organizing a free and fair election.
It was the beginning of the process that eventually led us to an agreement and to a new constitution.
So Joe Slovo has been very instrumental in advocating a system where we could remove the fears of the minorities in the country and also moderate the arrogance of a majority, of a black majority.
Formal negotiations began soon after in the World Trade Center near Johannesburg. The ANC and government agreed that the power-sharing coalition of major parties that would run the country would last for 5 years. Other parties had to accept.
There were, at the multi-party talks, 26 parties altogether. But every level-headed South African knew that essentially the settlement would come through what the government and the ANC could agree upon or not. The one had the power and the other one had the majority support.
The carve-up between ANC and National Party angered Afrikaners of the right wing, dominated by the Conservative Party.
You can see this process of ANC National Party cooperating against the rest. For example, if there's some problems or suddenly there's a veto or something that's just got stuck, then firstly Slovo will pick it up. And you can see he sort of write a small note to Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa would then wink for Rolf Meyer, and the two of them will go outside. They would formulate some sort of proposal, come back, the one would propose, the other one would second it, and it was just being forced through.
We maintained a very close link with our principals. And I think we followed very much the same pattern in that regard. I reported to FW, and he reported to Mandela, but very much on the same basis. Very close line, very hands-on.
The double act became known as the Rolf and Cyril show. Right-wing Afrikaners saw it as a threat.
We were sure that one or another time the government will capitulate and hand over the country to the communist forces.
Fearing they would be swamped by the ANC's advance, they wanted out.
My people, the Afrikaner folk, really has a right, according to international law, to demand some part of this land as their own. You have a place where a Brit can be British. I must have land where the Afrikaner, the Boer, can be a Boer.
A more moderate advocate of Afrikaner separatism was Constant Viljoen. He and Terreblanche both belonged to an alliance of more than 20 right-wing movements, the Afrikaner Volksfront. Viljoen was a former chief of the South African Defence Force and a war hero. In June 1993, after giving notice to the authorities, Viljoen took a petition to the multi-party conference.
We were going to hand over at the World Trade Center some demands by the Volksfront. In other words, to have self-determination for the Afrikaner people. That was the intention.
The AWB, Avia Beer in Afrikaans, were among the petitioners.
Eventually we got news that some of the people entering rather late were harassed at the gate. Some people were pulled out of their cars. It was getting a bit more ugly.
Then when the gates went open, the people started moving in, and then people started running.
Terreblanche was leading the AWB contingent.
And we tried to stop the crowd in front of the building. I actually ran ahead myself because I realized what was taking place and I was going to stop them, and I did so. I got on top of a pole and I sort of signaled to all the people and they did stop. And the whole crowd would have stopped in a very orderly manner. And then some AWB members on a vehicle came through. They ignored the warnings to stop.
They look like they're invading the place. Oh, look at it! They must shoot them. Big out of the way.